Welcome to Lagoon K. You are here to hear Eric Wu talk to us about dark side of the DNS force. And I want to make sure that you know where you are. This talk was rescheduled from later in the day. So be sure that you're here in Lagoon K for dark side of the DNS force. If you're not here for that talk, you know where the doors are. Smile. Before we begin, a few brief notes. Stop by the business hall located in Bayside AB. Also, the Black Hat Arsenal is on in the Palm Foyer on level 3, and of course the Arsenal reception at 1700. If you haven't picked up your merchandise today, it's your last chance to visit the Black Hat Swag and Bookstore. Don't forget to visit the Kali Linux Lab in Mandalay Bay A. And lastly, thank you for putting your phone on vibrate, which is another way of saying, please put your phone on vibrate if you're not turning it off, because it makes it easier for the rest of us to ignore the ringing while you wait for your voicemail to pick it up. When we get to the question part, if you have questions, please use one of the mics in the aisle so it gets recorded because the talk is being recorded. If not, Eric will repeat your question. Without further ado, Eric Wu.
Thank you, Ray. Good morning. DNS, domain name system, is a simple internet protocol touched by millions of users, including attackers from the dark side every day. In this talk, I'm going to discuss a set of new secret weapons behind some recent DNS-based attacks. Without DNS, it's impossible for us to navigate the internet with the numeric IP addresses. Does anyone remember this IP address? Fortunately, with the DNS, we only need to remember the user-friendly domain name like blackhat.com. DNS will map this domain name to the machine-friendly IP address. DNS itself is a distributed database implemented by a large number of naming servers. Naming server will respond to the queries from a client. A client can be DNS resolver or another naming server. When a client wants to find an IP address of a particular domain name, it will send query to the naming server. If the naming server is authoritative for that domain name, or if it has the information in its cache, it will answer the query. DNS is simple, yet scalable to support the entire internet domain name space. The number of the registered domain name on the internet has been steadily increased, and it passed 1 billion domain names since 2014. Why DNS enabling a user-friendly internet experience? The dark side also leveraged DNS to conduct malicious activities. Do you remember the so-called the largest DDoS attacks against Spam House 3 years ago? The attacker used OpenDNS resolver to generate up to 300 gigabit per second attacking traffic to take down that powerful site. DNS Open Resolver can take queries from any clients without filtering. It's a non-plugin for the internet's availability and stability. It's true 3 years ago. It remains the same as of today. by disabling one or more the enablers, we can effectively address this type of amplification attacks. For example, we can in addition to DNS resolver, there are two other enabling elements. One is DNS amplifiers, which provide large answer for a small query. And the amplifier can be legitimate domain name or purpose-built ones that do nothing but provide large amplification factor. The second element is the spoofing of the sending IP address of victim site. By doing so, the attacker can redirect the attacking traffic to the victim site. Let's take a look at a few examples of DNS amplifier. accessport.gov is a federal government agency site that promotes the equality for the people with disability. The website supports DNSSEC security extension. And the large answer of 3,900 bytes contains public keys and signatures required for DNSSEC verification. The amplification factor is up to 100. The attacker can also use purpose-built amplifier. HGMservice.us is composed by a large number of air records and map up to 242 IP addresses to this single domain name. The amplification factor is also close to 100. By disabling one or more enabling factors, we can effectively address this type of attack. For example, we can spoof the queries with spoofed IP addresses. We can disarm the amplifiers by replace the large answer with the small ones. Last but not least, we can continue to close the open DNS resolvers on the internet. While DNS amplification attacks are bad, we can still effectively address, mitigate it, as we discussed above. The new challenges we are facing today are manifested by the huge spike of DNS domain names on the internet. Based on this data provided nominally, when the total number of the domain names on the internet is above 3 billion, the internet's availability will be seriously impacted. Many IXP's DNS servers would be either down or slow to respond to the queries. Unlike the amplification attacks that normally aimed at individual domain names, this type of attack can impact many domain names and millions users. So what's behind this huge spike of domain name accounts? Let's take one step back and revisit blackhat.com. This domain name has 3 subdomain names defined. The first one is common www.blackhat.com for the website. The second one is for the mobile user. And the third one is dedicated to the PR and media purpose. At the moment, all three subdomain names are mapped to the same IP address. According to DNS protocol, it's also legal to send queries to other subdomains, even they are not defined. In this case, the naming server will just reply next domain. The idea of sending subdomain queries as attacking tool was first discovered around 2011, when China entered into a rapid growth period for its online gaming business. To lure more users, subdomain attack method is used to disrupt the competitors' gaming sites. The initial data we received from China was simply use of sequence numbers as prefixed to the target site. And we only saw this kind of attack in China, not in other regions at that time. So we thought it was just a local attack. Did not expect the serious consequences and the implications of such simple method. As time goes by, the subdomain attack method gained more attraction. And the attacking started spread out of China, and many high-ranking domain sites were under attack by this subdomain attacking method. For example, this 200 million subdomain queries to egghamnetwork.org was surely sufficient to take down the naming server of this site and make it inaccessible. The attacker also started to attack some top-level domain like .com. It's unclear about the motivation for this type of attack. Maybe it's just showcase, or maybe attacker is seriously trying to take down all the subdomains of .com. The core mechanism behind subdomain attack consists of random strings generator and the composition of the subdomains. The strings can be either fixed or very dense. It can be just simple timestamps or random strings of characters or random numbers, or just some words from dictionary books. The only requirement of the subdomain strings is uniqueness. Being unique, each and every subdomain queries will be sent to the naming server with extra workload. The traditional cache mechanism cannot help because each subdomain query is unique. Subdomain strings position also play an important role to help invade detection. It's common to place the strings on the leftmost position, but we also see it can occur in other positions like second leftmost or even third leftmost. Finally, the subdomain composition can be either single strings or multiple strings, or combination of constant and random strings. In this way, attacker can generate a large set of different substring patterns, make detection much harder. The impact of this subdomain attack is more severe than other methods against the DNS infrastructure for the following reason. First, it's very easy to generate unique substrings. Either it's random strings or sequence numbers, or dictionary words, or combination of above. Second, the OpenDNS resolver is not necessary because the volume of tag traffic required to take down a naming server is magnitude less than what's normally required by traditional DDoS attack method. Third, this type of attack aimed at naming server of target, not the target domain itself. So the spoofing IP address of target is not necessary, although it can be used to hide attacker's original IP address. As we know, a naming server can serve many domain names. It's also true for DNS resolver. It can accept and process queries from multiple clients. From a attacker's viewpoint, it's much easy task to generate less traffic volume in order to take down the naming server. And for IXPs, DNS server with 5 million query per second, or QPS, is high-end one. In order to take down such powerful DNS server, the attacker only needs to generate 2 gigabit per second traffic. It's far more easy task compared to the 300 gigabit attacking traffic required to take down the spam house site. Although it's easy for attacker to launch such attack, it's not true the other way around. We have several mitigation options to address this kind of attack. For example, we can drop queries with random strings, but some legitimate apps like antivirus products also use random strings for the signature updates. We can limit queries per source IP address, but attacking traffic can be small enough to fly under the radar of any DDoS detectors. One of the common used methods adopted by many security vendors these days is to drop all the queries towards a target site. This approach also has serious drawback, as it cannot apply to the high-ranking domain site, because it will block legitimate traffic as well. In conclusion, the dark side has been quite clever to abuse and explore the DNS protocol to serve its purpose. From the classic DNS cache poisoning attack that inject fake response with predictable sequence numbers, to DNS changes that modify DNS settings to redirect to the fake DNS servers, to DNS tunneling that transport sensitive data through DNS queries that are often overlooked by the existing security products. It's a sad fact that DarkSide has repeatedly won the battles in the cyberspace. Despite all the resources and efforts we have put to secure our digital assets and services. One of the reasons is the asymmetric advantages enjoyed by the dark side. They can continue the trial and error cycle until succeed without paying extra cost except the time delays. It's time for us to rethink our security strategy. Deception can be the key for us to rebalance the symmetric warfare situation and help us to win the war in the future. Thank you. Any question? Yes.
Yeah, it looks like two of the techniques that you defined are now used by the market community throughout the world, both in China and other places. So some of those particular techniques can actually go back to specific market companies that are doing that action. They have a lot more money to flow through with those like
So
are you aware of that? Have you actually mapped some of these for that particular process?
yes, the question is that, if I understood you correct, whether those kind of method has been used by some actors,
Advertising companies.
advertising companies. I'm not aware of any advertising companies use this kind of method for the marketing purpose. Okay. Okay.
Can you say something about the source IPs? Source IPs of these attacks? Can you provide information on those?
Yes. Actually, sometimes the source IP can just come from residential IP addresses, or sometimes it can be just spoofed IP addresses. It varies from attack to attack.
Yeah, it's usually botnet. So if you do research on where are these coming from?
Are they from cloud providers? Are they from home users? Are they from specific corporations that have been compromised?
Yeah, it varies. It varies. I mean, some attack we saw that is controlled by balance, and some of them actually is just misconfiguration of your home gateway devices.
How hard is it to fix this?
It's a lot easy. I mean, there are different options. For example, you can just drop this kind of attacking packets. But at the same time, if the target domain site has a lot of legitimate kind of traffic, then you need to make sure that you only block the attacking traffic. At the same time, you have to allow the legitimate traffic to go through. So you have to do some deep analysis to make sure there will be no false positives.
Do you see this getting worse or better?
It's getting worse because this is kind of weakness of protocol. And when bad guys start to leverage it, it's hard to deal. Thank you. Thanks.